Hello, my name is Colleen Getty, and we're shooting another episode of the Journey of a Story series, and we're here today with Bill Cummings, who wrote Starting Small and Making It Big. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Colleen. I'm delighted to be with you today.
Happy to talk to you. So we're just going to chat the way we always start our chat with maybe telling the viewers, how do you actually write? Because a lot of people probably don't think of you as a writer first. They think of you as a business person, but we're going to kind of talk about how important writing is when it relates to business and really anything in life. But so if you were writing, what would it look like? What would it sound like, and how often does it happen?
If I was writing, what would it look like? It would probably be a business letter more than anything else. That's how I spend a lot of time. It's either writing or editing business correspondence of one type or another.
Okay. And so when you were writing your book, did it start out as a business letter, or were you just sort of writing thoughts in a journal, or how'd that look?
I didn't ever have a journal. At some point, I started writing myself little notes about different things that ought to go into the book when the book came along, but that could have been 15 years ago.
Really?
As well as not. But I actually started writing the book in about 2 years before the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
And well, I'm sorry, no, more like 4 years before it hit. And then I went around and talked about it quite a bit.
Okay.
Had about 100 different colleges primarily. Never sold any books in bookstores at all.
Wow.
Never sold any books at book talks. It was always a question of selling them ahead of time. If somebody wanted me to come and talk, well, how large will the audience be? And we would be happy to provide the books.
So you're the perfect person to talk to for authors who you have the business savvy that a lot of writers we just don't have, because they write and then they realize it's also a business, is selling your book. But that's great advice for writers who maybe put the book sales first, and then that takes the pressure off. Once you show up, everyone has the book. There's not that whole having to sell your book situation.
Exactly, and I never once, not a single time did I ever sit at the back of the room afterwards or any place afterwards and sell anybody a book. But one time I spent 2.5 hours signing books, and it was the Mass Bay Community College.
Oh, okay.
And the thing that surprised me the most was I was well into the second hour, and somebody came up, and an older student, I think, and he said, "I don't want any book signed. I don't need it signed, but I just wanted to talk to you for a minute and say thank you." And I enjoyed it so much, and
oh, wow.
and I said, "You waited all that time, and you didn't even pull rank. You looked like you could have been a professor. You could have walked right up here anytime."
Right.
And he said, "No, I had a lot of interesting talks while I was in line, and it was very rewarding." Just that he would stand there that long.
Right. So, I mean, and that's the most important thing for a writer, is to think that, first of all, somebody cared about what you had to write about, and actually enough to want to connect with you and thank you, because obviously you made an impact on him.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that in putting the book together, and you meet someone afterwards who's read it and knowledgeably read it, and wants to talk about it, it's a real compliment that they cared enough. And I feel then I've had an experience in sitting down with someone and talking with them as I was doing the writing, or as he was reading or she was reading my writing.
Right. And writing's so personal.
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
even when you're writing about business, which your book toes the line of personal and business, but even if it is business, you're still putting your knowledge out there, and you're still putting your style out there, which, as a writer, I can tell you is putting yourself out there. It's vulnerable. But so let's rewind a little and really think about how, I'd love to know, how did this book happen? Like, you referenced it was a couple decades ago, maybe, before you actually published it. So where was the kernel, or when you talk about the book, it was going to go in the book, what was that? Like, what was that thought in your mind?
It was responding, effectively to friends and new friends that who would say, you ought to write a book, Bill. You ought to put, you've got so many stories, why don't you write a book? Mm. Well, someday maybe I will. I'd like to someday, and someday finally came. And,
what's someday look like so people know what to look for?
Right. I got close to 80 and decided I don't know how long my runway is going to be, but if I'm going to put this together and still have my heart in it, I better start doing it.
Right.
So I dedicated most nights. I did it at home at nighttime.
Okay. Just like a typical writer. You know,
Sure.
filling, interviewed a lady a couple interviews ago, and she said the nooks and crannies of life is where she wrote. Sounds
Okay,
like
sure.
that's what you did, huh?
No, I did it. I gave up television for a couple of years and would watch the 6:30 news with my bride of many decades, and then I would kind of excuse myself and go into my office and at home and would start writing. And I just used a yellow notepad most of the time. I had the luxury of a substantial staff and a couple of people that weren't overburdened all the time here at Cummings Properties in Woburn. Okay. And the big thing they did was to learn how to read my writing.
That's a challenge for everybody.
So that was always an issue. When I got toward the end of the book, by that time I had used an iPad enough that I started talking into an iPad, and I would send them, excuse me, from my time on vacation time. I would formally bring back pages to be typed up or sent back. Then I started emailing them back, so I got back to Boston from Florida. They'd be all mostly set up.
Right. And so how did ideas come, like when you were saying, you know, you'd go into your office and write or talk into your iPad, did you know, if people say, oh, I don't know where to begin or I don't know where to continue, was there any format you used or any sort of, I don't know, discipline that you said, okay, today I'm going to write about this, or does it just things came to you?
I tried to write it chronologically, but if I went from referencing my kindergarten home till junior high school, because I thought of that, I would do that, then I'd come back and fill in later. Okay. And then I'd jump maybe to college and my first job after college, that type of thing. Okay.
So it started first as a personal project, and later did you fill in the business, or was it always just both at the same time?
It was always business. I
Okay.
was business at first grade. And that's one of the things I do is to talk about things of that nature.
Right.
So, but it was a story about. The book is a book about entrepreneurship, and it's a book about philanthropy, and I like to say it's masquerading as an autobiography. Mm. But I did write it all myself and had a great time doing it.
Right.
The first edition was a little ragged. I found the most interesting thing was the same story told in 2 different chapters.
Ah, in different ways, or was it the same exact story?
No, they were different. They were some of the same words. It was obviously something I had picked up. I started writing and then put it aside and then started writing again, and left the original first couple of sentences aside and added to them again the second time.
Right. And that's where it's helpful to have other people reading your writing, because they're going to notice that.
Well, you'd like to think they would, but they didn't necessarily.
Oh, they didn't?
My editors were amateur editors. They were very good at their grammar and so forth, though, and it made me look good. So
nice. And so you sort of just thought in terms of, I mean, and that's a helpful tip, is if you're writing about your life, whether you're a business person or otherwise, you're using your chronology of your actual life as sort of the outline of your story.
Sure.
And so did you find, okay, you got through one pass and you had to really fill in the dots, or did you have pretty much everything, you just needed to smooth it out?
Oh, no, I had a lot of filling in to do.
Yeah. And did people tell you that, or just a reread on your own you decided?
I probably wrote every page 3 times. I don't know.
Really?
You see these writers that get out and write a book over an extended long weekend or something, and you wonder how they possibly do it.
Right.
And those people are writers, for sure.
Yes.
And I've always been a business person, and I've always enjoyed writing. I enjoyed putting stories together as a kid in assignments. I went to Tufts. My grades were never anything very good. They always got me by. But one of the best courses I ever took was Journalism 101.
Ah.
And I took journalism, and I got an A in that. And
Wow.
and I got A's from my 9th grade English teacher too, and in high school, but not in very many subjects.
Right. So.
Anything that had to do with writing, I usually did pretty well with.
Yeah. I mean, and when people think of writing in business, they honestly, I think, sometimes don't think that they have anything to do with each other, but they have everything to do with each other, I think. And I think you probably would agree. You can't make a presentation, you can't write a business letter, you can't persuade people of one thing or another if you don't know how to weave together some words. So maybe tell us a little bit about how important writing is for business. If you're thinking, oh, I'm going into business, I don't care about English class or writing. Maybe talk a little bit about how that is important.
Well, let me tell you how it manifests its importance around here at Cummings Properties. We haven't hired a management person in the company, and if we've, and I don't know if we've hired, 100 management people or 300, but there haven't been 5 of that 300 that didn't first take an editing exercise.
Ooh, really? I love it.
We have absolutely required of all candidates to complete an editing exercise, which is typically, it's a business letter loaded with, I think it's usually about 30, 35 grammar or spelling errors or punctuation errors. Little things like the school committee had their meeting at a certain time, and it is opposed to its meeting at a certain time.
Okay.
And there'd be some things that would be in all of those letters.
Right.
And they weren't the same. We didn't want it passed around from one candidate to another. And very, very few people do it well.
Really? Yes. I mean,
Nobody ever
believe
got
it,
them all. There's a writer that you might know the name, Neil Swidey. You know that name?
no, I don't.
You mentioned the Globe earlier. He
Okay.
wrote a lot for the Globe.
Ah.
He was in Globe magazine especially.
Okay.
And he had his very first job here. And now he's teaching writing journalism, I think, at Brandeis. But his very first job was here, and I think he had 3 or 4 wrong. And I said, "Wow, isn't that nice? This guy knows something about writing."
Right. Right. And I used to teach 8th grade English, and grammar is not my, strong point. But when I would teach my students grammar, I said, it's because people will judge you on that, and you don't want to be putting the worst foot forward,
It's so very important, and we're not looking for everyone who comes here to be an excellent writer, but one of the things it does, it identifies for us the candidates who are coming in who've got some real good skills. And so we use them as editors for other people. And I talked about editors, people, and the only people who help me as editors were the people in this company.
Right.
We've got, there's 5 of them, I think, right now that
That's really interesting. I mean, I came in here to talk about your writing of this book, but I didn't know that basically your whole business revolves around good writing, really.
Sure.
And good thinking.
Yeah, it starts off, every business relationship we have, and Cummings Properties has got 11 million square feet of commercial real estate right around this area. And there are probably, I don't know, more than 2,000 businesses in that group, and every one of those business relationships is anchored with a written lease, a lease document. And those documents have to be right. And if there's special conditions and things written in, somebody needs to know how to phrase it and do it correctly. If there's a disagreement that comes up, and we've got to write letters to to home office people or to the attorney representing the company, it ought to be well prepared and well thought out.
Right.
And we have lawyers here too, and they can be good or not so good. Most of them are pretty good down in our legal department, but they don't do the business writing. They do the problem.
Right.
And we try to keep them out of a problem by writing things.
Right. I mean, and that's a good point there. You can write yourself into a problem or out of it.
Absolutely.
And if you're sloppy and you're not like thinking, and especially these days where you just send things off with the click of a button and you're not thinking and editing and really deciding, is this what I want to say, you can get into a problem.
And particularly something that might be going for mass distribution. It's going out and going to be published somewhere, anywhere. And it darn well better be checked by somebody else.
Right.
I won't send a letter of mine out without somebody looking it over. And if it's an important letter, it'll get well edited and by other people who know how to write, and they'll think of different angles. I'm not going to think of all the angles that might apply in a difficult situation.
Right.
But together, we can do that. And it's extremely important. So we do a lot of that around here.
Right. Sounds like you have your own in-house critique group too.
Sure.
Because different people have different perspectives, and they'll pick up on things that someone else won't. It's helpful to have a handful of people at least.
Yeah, and we've certainly, on numerous occasions, we haven't done it for a while, but if you'd like to come in and do some editing, some writing talks with some of our people and do a group of 3 or 4 or 5
Right.
hour-long sessions, we've done that many times, and we'd love to have you if you'd like to do that. No, seriously, call me sometime.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, and it's the type of thing that it just as I'm sure you would do, just get people excited about caring about what they write, and that it makes a difference.
Yes. And I think, writing is so humble, I'll say. It's sort of the backbone of things, and everything's built on it, that people just don't think about it. And it's so easy. It's accessible. It's not like some things where, I have to have this, that, or the other thing. It's entry level. You don't have to have a dime. You just need a legal pad and a pen if you want, to get your words down. And I think for that reason, a lot of times people don't think of it as being important, but it is. It's really important. And I just want to circle back to this in terms of how, because we were talking a little bit before we're talking now about how I'm not sure at what part you brought this, if it was sort of almost a finished product to get it published, and you were having a hard time finding someone who would actually publish it. You want to talk a little bit about actually trying to get this book, now that once you had it written, into a publishing company?
We laid out the book here, and that's an unusual skill to have, but we have people who are doing our advertising. The cover came from here.
So somebody in-house designed the
Somebody
cover,
Somebody
and then
in-house took
somebody
a picture and designed the cover. Somebody else knew what we had to do to make the book look right, so we could give the plates, the proof of the actual pages to the printer.
Okay.
I will tell you that, do you know about what it costs to print a book like that?
No, I'd love to know.
I think at the time we got it, it was probably less, but it's something in relatively small quantities. Probably today would be about $3.50 or $4 a book.
Wow.
And the author gets the difference then. And I think if you're having a publishing company prints your book and buys your book and gives you some number of dollars, I think they will sell it to you at about, if you want some copies for yourself, they'll give you a number of them, and then they'll sell you the rest of them probably at $10 a copy, something of that nature.
Right.
And so every penny we bring in, the book is today, it's sold online with Amazon and a couple of other places. And an electronic version, I think, is $5 or $4.50 or something. But every penny that comes in goes to Cummings Foundation. And so that makes me feel good about going out and doing talks and selling the book.
Right.
But we sell it to anybody that wants to have a have a talk, we look for a minimum of 200 people, and we sell it. We sell it at $10 a copy then.
Okay. So you already have your format all figured out before you even go to a place, which is probably helpful for people calling. They know exactly what to expect.
Sure.
In terms of like a book event, which again for other authors could be scaled down, and used in terms of like a format for them to use. That's helpful to think that way.
It's if somebody knows that he or she is going to be able to get bookings one way or another through friends or acquaintances, and they make commitments ahead of time. We think we'll have 100 people there, and we'll buy 100 books, and we'll make it our business to get 100 people there. It's a nice, convenient way to do it.
Right. And before you even got the book printed, I remember you were talking about talking to a woman, and she, part of the problem which a lot of writers run into, unfortunately, is there's not enough drama, or there's not the intrigue. So you want to talk a little bit about like really having a difficult time actually getting someone to publish it.
When I was assuming that, of course, somebody was going to buy the book and that they would think that they could probably sell it, then I heard the number was that they thought if you could sell 10,000 books, it would be a success. And the publishers who didn't want any part of it made the point that I just didn't use the word drama. They wanted something, overcome some terrible obstacle, and health obstacle perhaps, or horrible poverty growing up, or some terrible illness, or I was abused in some manner, or suffered a terrible accident, or whatever. They needed some highlight like that. So we just didn't have that. That, and they told me so.
I guess that's lucky. I'd rather not sell a book than to have a horrible tragedy. Right?
Want me to make it up and I'll put something in?
Wow.
I didn't want to do that. I had another major company, and I won't mention the name of it. You would, and all of your readers would know the company, but I had said too much about the then presidential candidate who went on to become elected, and they didn't like the attitude because they were going to buy it 8,000 copies for all of their employees. All of their agents who sell a particular financial services product around the world, and said it wouldn't make sense to alienate the percentage of our people who are extremely conservative, wouldn't want to read about what we talked about in terms of about the There you go. Right.
Ellipses. Save the day all the time.
That worked. Yep, that worked out well. And so the book that you're looking at now is the 6th edition.
Oh.
And editions 1 through 5 had a different cover.
Okay, I was going to say this looked different from the one I had. And why? So maybe talk a little. I've never talked to anybody.
I softened what I said about the presidential candidate.
And did you come up with a big tragedy too while you're at it? So maybe talk a little, because I've never talked to anyone who had different editions. What is a different edition? Like, what does that entail? When you say 6th edition, what does that mean?
Effectively, it meant the 6th printing.
Okay.
And
not that anything changed necessarily. It's just the batch.
As much as changed as all the mistakes that I had. They have printing it on our own. We had the luxury of being able to change pages easily.
Right.
And just inserting them and updating it and correcting all the mistakes that I gradually found. I told you in our chat ahead of time that we had one section with the same paragraph repeated substantially 2 different times in 2 different chapters.
Right.
Well, that was edition
Got rid of that.
number 1 and edition number 2.
Okay.
We got rid of that.
And readers always love to think they found the mistake. So I'm sure you made some people happy, like, I found the mistake.
I have an errata sheet on my desk, and so far there are only 3 or 4 words on it, I think.
Okay.
Or page notations if there's another edition.
Wow. Well, that's good to know because I always, people wonder what is a new edition? Is it just a printing? But it's a way to kind of clean it up if you find things or fine tune things. So we're starting to run out of time, even though I still have a million things I wanted to talk about. One quick thing I wanted to talk about was reading your Globe. I think it was the Connections piece in the Globe magazine about your dad and you and flipping boats, I think, right?
Yes.
Selling them. You want to just talk? I only want to bring that up because even though this is both personal and business, that was sort of like a microcosm of personal and business, and I feel like it was like a mini course on you can write about both, and you can have a passion for writing, and use that to your advantage in the business world. A couple snippets on where that piece came from?
That particular story came because somebody at the Globe read the book and said, "Boy, this would work beautifully on the inside back cover of the Globe magazine."
Okay.
And I was actually that came with a stipend too. Ooh. And I think it was something like $110 maybe.
Wow.
And if you want, you don't have to take it. I said, well,
right.
Give double to the next person that might need it.
Okay.
Instead. But that was nice getting the offer of money for it.
Yes.
That was fun, certainly.
That is.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's, as writers, you don't always get money for your writing, right? You're writing in between the margins and helping people, maybe like you're saying with others that you work with. And but sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say your readers, your viewers might like to know that we started off with the first edition with 2,000 copies. So that was modest,
right.
Thinking we were going to sell 10, but I'd heard too many people with boxes and boxes of books in their basement or in their garage.
Right.
So the next edition we made 4,000, then we got 6,000, and we finally got the next to the last order up to 10,000.
Oh, wow.
And I thought those would be the end of it, but it wasn't quite, and by that time we had the pandemic hitting.
Okay.
And my book talk stopped.
Right.
Just as I was running out, but we got another 2,000, so we got it up to about 22 or 23,000 copies sold.
Wow.
So,
congratulations on that.
Had a great time.
So congrats, Bill, on your writing, and honestly, it's a great course in life and in business, in my opinion. But you want to sort of wrap up with any advice for people that are thinking that writing doesn't matter, or that think that they can't write. Any sort of advice from your experience of writing?
Well, you don't have enough time for me to talk about anybody talking about writing not mattering, because I think it matters so very, very much. And as far as writing a book, take it as it's so easy to get a book published in small numbers, very small numbers, as you undoubtedly know now, and it's something like they'll be paid $200 and 7 cents a page or something like that, and they'll give you all the books you want or as few as you want.
Right.
So it's such an easy thing to do, to start off in a very very small way, and give them to all your best friends, or if you want, or at least know that they'll take it if you can't sell them.
Right. Well, thanks, Bill. So if anybody wants to sit where Bill's sitting and talk to us about your writing, your published piece from start to finish, feel free to contact us at theroomtowrite.org.